I want all of you to get up out of your chairs. I want you to get up right now and go to the window, open it, and stick your head out and yell, "I'm as mad as hell, and I'm not gonna take this anymore!"
What we've got here is failure to communicate.
I'm the dude, so that's what you call me.
Let's go get sushi in La Fe.
Yippee-ki-yay, motherfucker.
Hoo-ah!
And we're back with episode 6 of the Furious Cinema Podcast. I'm Pete Roberts, and I'm here with my co-host Sebastian Hasselbeck. Hey Seb, how you doing?
Hey Pete.
And
good to be back.
It's been a while. It's been about a year or so. I don't know how long, but so it's good to we wanted to do another show and come back with a different set of films that we wanted to talk about. But this one is more about the 1970s, since we just got done reading the new Quentin Tarantino book, Cinema Speculation, and that was we kind of wanted to use it as a jumping off point for this episode. So we read the book and we both loved it. We did an episode on Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, the novel, and we really enjoyed that one. But this one is different. This is like a cinema analysis book type thing. It's really telling about how Quentin, when he grew up, and how the movies he was first seeing at a young age, and in his childhood kind of tied in with the new Hollywood era. So all throughout the 70s, he saw all those movies that were kind of groundbreaking in their own way, the Godfather and Taxi Driver and all those types of movies. So it was really and I love all those movies anyway. So it was just really cool to hear his perspective on all those different things, right? That's what I liked about it.
As I wrote in my review for tarantino.info, is for those who haven't read Cinema Speculation, but for those who've read the Once Upon a Time in Hollywood novelization, there's a few sub chapters in Once Upon a Time in Hollywood novel where he is already testing kind of the idea of his prose for a movie criticism book. So these little episodes where he talks about Kurosawa movies or whatever, these are stylistically absolutely how Cinema Speculation is in a way, and I like that, and I also like that Cinema Speculation is not just a series of reviews. It's definitely not just a bunch of reviews pasted together. It's a story that he's telling, and it's a story that starts with him being a kid, and it ends with him accepting the Academy Award for Pulp Fiction, and it takes us down into a little exploration of what the 70s did for cinema, and he does that in I think in two ways. One is a very personal note, because he
Right.
tells us how he saw these movies and when, and with his mom or with his uncle so and so, and or whether they whether he snuck in or whatever. And on the other hand is, and I think some people might not realize, but a lot of this stuff is really well researched, and he draws from interviews with people and reviews that he's reading from his archives and stuff like that. So right. I think it's a quite well-rounded book that is both personal as well as deeply researched, but it's not academic or anything, and it makes it extremely accessible because he writes really well, but also not.
It's almost like you're reading, it's not so highfalutin that you're you can't. It's like your friend's writing a book, and you're kind of reading about your friend's adventures and how he went to the movies and his discoveries and his views on things. Sort of like how when you watch him in interviews, he's just good at enthusiastically explaining his ideas on different movies and stuff, why they were popular, or why he didn't like them. But this is that type of idea, but it's all the new Hollywood films. So they're all movies that he loves, and he'll give his own idea, his own perspective on in background on the movies, and like he talks to, like, say if he didn't know a lot about a certain movie and he was really like curious about it, he'd talk to certain people that were there. Like he'll talk to like William Friedkin, or he'll talk to like Walter Hill, and he'll get like the actual real story of what happened, on what he wanted to find out about. So it was like and another thing I liked about the book was he had some little tributes to people in there too, mixed in with all of his critical pieces. So like he has a whole chapter on Kevin Thomas, this critic that he was a real big fan of when he was growing up, and he kind of does a nice, like, I think he said when he went, he got an award for Pulp Fiction. He finally met Kevin Thomas. That was like a big, kind of a big event in his life, because he was a big fan of like certain critics. Like he loved like Pauline Kael and stuff, and that's definitely, she was one of his big influences as far as writing goes, and just seeing things from in a different way, like and I think another way that she influenced this book is that he was talking about was as she was writing all her books, someone would say, "Oh, why don't you write like an autobiography of like your life and stuff?" And she says, "Well, I actually did, and it's basically sprinkled throughout my reviews. You can kind of find out about me as a person in my life if you read all my movie reviews." So that's sort of like what he did with this book, which I thought was really interesting too. And then he has other things he does, like he'll delve into the one thing I didn't really know about was the New Hollywood era, and he actually broke that up into two groups: the post-60s anti-establishment group and the movie brats. So the anti-60s, the anti-establishment group would be like Dennis Hopper and like Henry Jaglom and those guys, but then the movie brats would be like De Palma, Scorsese, and William Friedkin and all those guys, and George Lucas. So it's like there was a difference between their films if you watch them. Like I think the movie brats were more like kind of pop film, like like kind of like genre films and stuff. And
but also they were movie nerds. Like they were,
that's what I mean. They were movie nerds. So they like Steven Spielberg would make like Duel or Jaws, and it would be like a kind of a mainstream like kind of B movie or something. And then Scorsese, I suppose Scorsese he was sort of coming more from like the art house side with his movies, a little bit more influenced by that. But like he wasn't doing like Star Wars and like genre films a little bit. But I mean he had his own influences too. But anyway, so that was just another thing. And then, I really liked the stuff about another little chapter that I didn't really expect to read about was Floyd, the guy that lived with him. That was really kind of a cool thing. It was just, so he kind of went to the movies with this guy, and like who was living in his house at a certain point. And, they became friends, and they'd go see movies. And I loved the story about like how they went to see Eaten Alive, and they were just like laughing through the whole movie. And, he had a lot of movies that he went to, and like, he was just like laughing and having a good time with the movie. I don't know. I just love those little stories. That was just what I enjoyed about it.
Yeah, and that's actually a really touching thing, because at first I got a little puzzled, because he's not sugarcoating the story of him and Floyd, but in the end, once you get done with the chapter, you realize what, this was probably not exactly a father figure, but it was kind of a father figure when it comes to his movie education. And then he's actually he ends the book with he should have thanked him when he.
I was going to say that. I was going to just bring that up.
And that was a really touching. Yeah,
it was. Book. Yeah. But but another thing we have to say is like it's pretty amazing all like the adult movies that he saw as like a young kid. Because I mean, half of these movies he saw when he was like 6 years old. I mean, his mother and his stepfather were bringing him to like Dirty Harry and like all these like Deliverance, like all this stuff it's like so it's stuff that even when you're an adult you're like kind of shocked by. So it's like I thought that was just really interesting. But in a way that kind of was the way I grew up in a way too, because I didn't go to these movies, but I would like be able to rent all these movies. So I'd see like Scarface at age 9 or something, like, what I mean? Like, so it's, I kind of understand that. My parents weren't like, my mother especially wasn't real. Like she let me watch like almost all types of stuff, like, slasher movies we'd watch together, like all types of horror stuff.
And look how you turned out.
and I turned out great. So, but I mean, I think that's where, like, when you're at a young age like that, I think that's where your movie like love comes from. Like you experience so much crazy stuff, and then it just, it stays with you, and you just want to, keep exploring the different movies and stuff. But anyways, that's just another.
Yeah.
That's
And
my stuff.
one last thing I think about the book that's great is that when you look at the table of contents, it might look like, oh, this book is just
I don't
five
even think
movies.
is there a table of contents in the book. I thought there wasn't a table of contents.
Okay,
I think I missed it.
If you look at, let's say, if you look at,
Or you're saying the list of movies or something,
or like a list of the chapters, whatever.
Yeah, right.
It's not just that, because each chapter might, a chapter might be titled Dirty Harry, but
Right.
it's not like the entire chapter is about Dirty Harry. I mean, for all the chapters, he starts out with a lot of context about the genesis of the film, of course, but also about the people involved, and sometimes it takes him a couple pages until he returns to the actual movie that's the title of the chapter. And I like that because these are not just reviews, these are his segues into telling us stories about that time in movie making. And I think that's what makes the book really of great value to both the, let's say, the novice as well as the more seasoned cineast. Right.
And I really liked sort of like what you're saying is I liked how like you'd read the chapter about Bullet, but like he might be talking about another film by Don Siegel through like half of the chapter. So like you'll be reading about like Invasion of the Body Snatchers or one of his like film noir movies or something like that, and you get a whole bunch of different films kind of packed into one chapter that's about, it's sort of like the theme of the chapter is about a certain film, but it ties in a whole bunch of other different movies. And, he'll talk about like someone that wrote the movie, and then he'll go into like some of the movies they might have made or something, just a whole bunch of different stuff. Like, I don't know if it was the Paradise Alley chapter, but like he went into a whole thing about how he loved Rocky, and he kind of like was tying Rocky in with Paradise Alley. And I thought that was really cool too.
And this little gang of actors, what are they called? Play the kids gang, whatever. And
the East Side Kids or the Dead End Kids and all those. Yeah, exactly. That was good too. Yeah, and then then another chapter, like he did Taxi Driver, but then he followed it up with what if Brian De Palma had directed Taxi Driver, because he originally had the script and he gave that to Martin Scorsese. Mm-hmm. So he's kind of like wondering like how he would have cast it and how he would have directed it and stuff. That was really interesting too. I love that one. But I love the whole book. There's a couple movies in there that I'm not a huge fan of, like Daisy Miller. I'm not like the biggest fan of that one. Like I would have liked to have read a chapter about Paper Moon or The Last Picture Show or something like another Peter Bogdanovich film, but that's the one he chose. But whatever. That's just a little personal stuff.
The selection of movies puzzled me at first, and I think what's good is that, as you said, the book's not just about the titular titles of the chapters, but they're about so much more. Right. But I think he manages to drive across a point with his selection of movies, and they might not be all the grindhousey stuff that we're usually hearing or reading from Quentin, but this is a very specific selection. But also, and it brings us to what we're going to talk about next. It brings us to what were the movies from the 70s that meant a lot to us. So what were the movies from the 70s that we're pulling out of the shelf because we're now inspired to think about the movies from that era or decade that we found interesting. And of course, there is no such thing as 70s cinema. I mean, there's like a New Hollywood, there's the movie brats, there's grindhouse and exploitation cinema, there's the spaghetti westerns that came out later, there's the horror and slasher movies. Then like the late 70s, that's almost like 80s cinema stylistically, I would say. So there's a lot of stuff that is rolled into, you cannot call it 70s cinema, but if we were talking,
although if it came out in the 70s, though, that means it's like that's how I look at it. Maybe not like one category, but the decade itself, anyways. You know what I'm saying?
So depending on what aspect you're looking at, it can be different kinds of movies, and that's kind of the beauty about it. And I think that you and we made a point of for this episode to not pick grindhousey flicks, because
we want to save it for the other podcast
topic for something else.
And also, like, it was like I was going to say is like I've seen so many movies from the 70s. That's like probably my favorite decade for film. So trying to narrow that down to like two films to talk about is like, it's kind of like ridiculous. So I basically just picked two of my favorite movies. I mean, I'm not going to like, you can't narrow down. I just checked my Letterboxd stats, and I've watched 1,352 movies in the 70s by alone. So I'm trying to narrow that down to two, which is like, whatever. I'm just going to pick two of my favorite movies from the 70s. It could be anything, like, so I just picked two of my favorites, and that's it. And you did the same thing. So,
right. So
we could do a whole, we could do like
so
a whole series on, we could do a whole podcast series on the 1970s, but it's like, that's whatever. Go ahead.
Yeah. So for our listeners, each of us picked two movies from the 70s, and they may not be the best or the favorites, but they are titles that for us have a certain quality that we wanted to talk about. And in the end, we hope that maybe this is something that inspires a few of the listeners out there to do the same, maybe as you did. Look into the Letterboxd list and see, okay, what are the movies from the 70s that I have seen, what are the movies from the 70s that I haven't seen that are really interesting.
But it's like, I think with this, we wanted to pick two movies that meant a lot to us, that we've probably rewatched a lot of times. That's how I did mine. I just picked two of my favorites that probably from the past few years that I've been rewatching over and over again. They just hit you a certain way, or, you just connect with them a certain way, or, that's how I did it. So I don't know. Okay.
So we're going to alternate. Do you want to start with one of yours?
Yeah, sure. I was going to start with Scarecrow, which is from 1973. It was released by Warner Brothers. And this was directed by Jerry Schatzberg. And the stars are Gene Hackman and Al Pacino. And Al Pacino had worked with Jerry Schatzberg a couple years before in The Panic in Needle Park, which is another movie a possible pick, but I just chose this one because I just been watching this one a lot. And it's like kind of a road movie. They're both sort of, I can kind of read the synopsis just to give a little idea, let people an idea what it's about. So Max is an ex-con with a bad temper in a dream to open his own car wash in Pittsburgh. Lion is an ex-seaman on his way to Detroit to see the wife and child he ran out on 6 years before. They're a couple of born losers, and their story will win your heart. Scarecrow is the sad, funny, powerfully moving odyssey of two dreamers adrift on the high seas of life. Like castaways, they take each day as it comes, reading signs in the wind and vaguely waiting for their ship to come in. And like castaways, too, they form a tentative, strengthening, finally unbreakable bond of friendship. Gene Hackman and Al Pacino are magnificent in their leading roles as Max and Lion. Scarecrow is an actor's movie, and Hackman and Pacino are actors par excellence. Hackman, winner of the 1971 Academy Award for Best Actor in his hard-bitten role as Popeye Doyle in The French Connection, shapes a stunningly three-dimensional character whose speech, gestures, and mannerisms etch him indelibly into our minds. Al Pacino's intensity animated the disintegrating amateur bank robber in Dog Day Afternoon and powered the brooding, domineering Michael Corleone in The Godfather. In Scarecrow, he portrays a true innocent, a simple-minded wanderer whose heart remains just out of reach of the deadening influences around him. His great range as an actor has never been more dramatically revealed. This is the third feature film by director Jerry Schatzberg, who also directed Al Pacino's powerful film debut in The Panic in Needle Park. Scarecrow won the coveted Golden Palm Award as Best Picture of the 1973 Cannes Film Festival. It's a boldly crafted, determinedly unsentimental essay on the human condition. And on the road with Max and Lion, you may find your own outlook on life spring suddenly into sharper focus. So that just gives you like a little idea of what the movie's like. And I think it was sort of like inspired by, came out in the wake of Easy Rider, Midnight Cowboy, and it has a little, they've kind of compared it to Of Mice and Men too. It has a little touch of that to it too. But I mean, I've always been a big fan of road movies. I think you're a fan of road movies too, but like, just people going like, taking on an adventure.
Yeah, Of Mice and Men is what it reminded me in the beginning.
Absolutely. Right, and I that's one of my favorite like movies, the original one with Burgess Meredith and Lon Chaney Jr. I've been a fan of that for a long time. But I probably watched this and I subconsciously thought about that, but I didn't realize I wasn't probably thinking of Mice and Men. But when I read that, I was like, oh yeah, definitely Of Mice and Men. But of course, it was cool because Gene Hackman had just come off French Connection and Al Pacino had just done The Godfather. So these characters are sort of, Gene Hackman is always good at playing like kind of hot-headed, tough characters like that. In this one, he's playing another, like an ex-con, and then Al Pacino's playing something different than Michael Corleone. He's sort of like a amiable like ex-sea merchant guy, and he's like, they're both on the road and they're trying to get back to Max wants to start a car wash in Pittsburgh, and he meets Francis Lionel Del Bucchi is Al Pacino's character's name, but Max gives him the nickname Lion, so they just call him Lion throughout the movie. But so they decide to, like, go into business as, the co-owners of the car wash. So they just start traveling across the country together. I think it starts in California. I think it's like somewhere in California. I don't know where it is, but I always loved the opening of the movie, like how it starts out like in that big wide shot of like the hill, and Max is just kind of walking across a huge hill, and it's like out in the middle of nowhere, and then Al Pacino is like, just happens to be like standing near a tree, and they're just like, "Hey, how you doing?" And like, I just thought I just loved the opening shot of it. And
in a way, the characters are complete opposites of what both of these actors had played before, because here they're like almost like small time hustlers, almost I would say almost like losers.
Yeah, they are. They are
kind of
losers.
They're like larger than life,
right? Yeah, I mean, it's cool because like they're kind of like, like French Connection. Also like the setting, like, they're kind of like in the city. They're playing like urban type characters. This one, they're kind of like, just like outsiders and like drifters and stuff. I just love that kind of like just seeing those different types of characters compared to the other ones that they had just played. So, and especially with Al Pacino had just come off The Godfather, and that's such a huge big hit. And they were both in huge hits, and this one is sort of like low key and kind of like a little side, understated type movie.
Yeah, and as you mentioned, the opening shot, I mean, one thing that struck me from the beginning, and I had not seen this before, so this was one movie, just like the other movie that you picked for this show. I had the first time watching it. But the cinematography is just amazing. I mean, this is obviously Vilmos Zsigmond, Heaven's Gate, The Deer Hunter,
Blowout.
This movie Blowout, and then a bunch of other movies. I like his work a lot.
He's amazing cinematography.
The movie looks absolutely fantastic. And
and I'm pretty
not just the outdoor scenes or whatever.
Right. And I'm pretty sure that Jerry Schatzberg was a photographer before he became a director. So that's probably, that's one reason probably it looks good as it does because of that. But yeah, I mean, and then the cinematography by Vilmos Zsigmond, of course, is just another aspect that makes it look awesome. But yeah, I mean, it's sort of and another thing I was thinking of when I was watching these movies again is they all sort of have that 1970s new Hollywood like ending to them in a way. You know what I mean? They're like a downbeat ending. Almost all the movies that we picked, they all have that kind of like, not like when you go to see the movies in the 80s, like where like everybody would like, ride off into the sunset happy or something like that. These end with like kind of like tragic ways. Not all of them, but some of them.
Super tragic, yeah.
Yeah,
I mean, it's just I thought this was a super down ending. Wow.
Yeah, and that's like a really like that's like a perfect example of like the new Hollywood style. Because I think what happened in the 70s was like the directors were all like kind of students of the French New Wave and Italian neorealism and like the Japanese films, and those had like different. They weren't all like happy go lucky like type movies. They were all like kind of like they all had crazy like different tones to them. So that's why they like even like if you watch like a movie like Mean Streets or something that ends with like a total crazy ending. Like it's not like the usual happy like golden age Hollywood ending. It's just they were just influenced by that style where everything doesn't end like on a upbeat note. So that's just one of the little aspects of new Hollywood films that I've always liked too,
Yeah, there's a few things that came to mind, and this is just maybe my little feedback having seen this the first time. I mean, I read somewhere that this might not be like the pinnacle of the new Hollywood movies, but it's definitely very, as you said, very new Hollywood in how dark and serious and brutal it can get. And I think there are some lighthearted moments in there, and especially
there is
the first half especially. But then not to give anything away, but in like especially the third act, it gets like really. It does away with the remaining ideas of the lightheartedness, and it gets really dark.
It kind of takes it takes like a turn, like you don't know exactly where it's going to go, and it kind of takes kind of like a dark twist at the end. towards the end of the movie. But that's what I'm trying to get at. Like, I think a lot of those movies, like think of Easy Rider or something, or like Cool Hand Luke or something.
Mhm.
Like even Bullet, kind of like, even like those movies, they all, in Dirty Harry, just look at all the endings of these movies. None of them like end with like, at the end of Dirty Harry, I mean, not to spoil it, but he kills the guy and then he kind of like throws his badge away and he walks away. Or Bullet, like it kind of ends like with him killing somebody, and like, it just doesn't end with like a happy like tone to it. It's just like kind of like dark and kind of like sudden type stuff. And that's the way this one goes,
Yeah, and even the main premise,
Right.
and that's also very, very new Hollywood, is that the
Right.
main premise also gives you like a weird feeling in the stomach. Like,
Right.
this is again it's again one of those hustler movies. The guys keep talking about their dreams, but they never really reach them. You know
Right.
that it's all a lot of bull. They keep telling
Right.
themselves these stories, but then they're just really a bunch of hobos.
They never get there, and
they're
it's,
really horrible con men. Like, they're really bad at it.
I know, but also it's like another thing where like a lot of these movies where like the main, like even like the main heroes of the movies, like they'll end up getting killed or something, like in the movie, or they'll go to prison or something, like there's all these dark things that happen to these people versus like the way in later decades, like like there's never like someone dying, like the main character isn't going to die like at the end of the movie. They're just going to like triumph over whatever the problem is, like Top Gun or something. Everybody's like happy at the end of the movie, but it's just the the classic 3-act structure thing. But the 70s movies seem to like kind of like go against that. They were like kind of going like into different areas and trying different ideas as opposed to just doing the same old thing. So
yeah,
that's just why I like them too.
That you mentioned the structure, because what struck me about this movie is that it actually has kind of a 2-part structure.
Right.
They're bad hustlers outside of jail, and then they end up in jail, and
like a 1-act structure.
But then they're just as bad in jail as they are outside of jail.
I know.
So they're just, really it's like even jail is too big a place for their like limited capacity of making things happen. Like sometimes you have prison movies where you have like people that are like in jail and they're like they're too big for the place. They're too smart. They outsmart everyone, and then but these two guys are like, oh, come on.
And I also kind of saw.
And I think that one of the greatest moments is when Gene Hackman's character breaks out in a little dance in that bar towards
he takes his like does his little strip.
You realize that in the end somehow they know that they suck at what they're doing, but as much as it kind of
they have moments. They have moments.
They have their little moments, and
they
have a little joy in life or whatever.
But I mean, don't you think like when I watch these movies, I feel like they're more like real life is. Real life isn't like 3-act structure all the time, like 1, 2, 3. There's like all these weird like twists and turns that we go through, like some things will happen and like you'll have to deal with it, or you know what I mean, like
also not dishwasher to millionaire.
I mean you meet people that are
dishwasher.
I mean whatever it is, it's just that's just, I mean as far as like my what I'm interested in as far as cinema goes, that's the type of, and this type of movie is like it's not really about the like story so much. I mean that's they're going on the trip across the country. It's more about like just getting to know these characters and like seeing their personalities, and also I think this movie in particular is probably an awesome film for aspiring actors to watch, because you can really see two masters like really delivering the goods as far as like the acting goes. I mean, it's just amazing to me. Gene Hackman and Al Pacino like at their best kind of in the 70s. I just think that would be a good like place to, if you're an actor, like to watch that. So, and
I jotted down one thing of it's a little trivia basically, but we're gonna get to your other movies after the break. But I found a similarity between this movie Scarecrow and the other movie you picked, and it's that in both movies you have a character that tells a story about how they got their fingers whacked with a ruler by their teacher when they're
that's right. I forgot about that. That's right. The ruler thing, that was pretty good.
I thought that was really funny. Both movies had that.
And I think both, I mean, and they both sort of have that same, like, that same type of theme to them, like outsider. It's like actually Max and Lion kind of remind me of scruffy dogs, like a two couple of dogs, like, kind of like going across the, the country together. They just remind you of that a little bit, like, just in there, like, one's like kind of like a little nice little pooch, and the other one is like kind of like a mean mean dog or something. Anyways. But that was just one little thought I had. But Yeah, I mean,
So yeah,
it's just awesome.
thank you for pointing me to that movie because
Yeah,
I felt a little like Gala Avery trying to keep up. In this
Cali.
case, I'm keeping up with you
Yeah,
because for this episode, I
yeah.
discovered two movies that I hadn't seen before.
Yeah, I mean, these are two of my favorites. So hopefully, like, if people listen to this, they'll watch them if they haven't seen them. But I think if you're a movie geek, a lot of people know these movies. They probably have heard of them. It's not like, I'm picking like Jaws and Star Wars. I mean, they're a little bit more, a little bit more obscure for people, I think, than those. But obviously, but I guess just a little trivia on the making of the movie. Gene Hackman and Al Pacino kind of went in incognito as beggars in San Francisco just to try to get into character and like learn more about them, what they were playing. So that was kind of interesting. And I guess they had like a little tough time working together because Al Pacino and Gene Hackman's acting styles were a little bit different. So it was like kind of created a little bit of friction. But anyways, whatever they did, I just loved the end result. So, okay. So yeah, that was Scarecrow. And that was my first pick, and you're next.
Okay, and we're just gonna keep going. So I'm gonna do a little intro, and then you do your reaction, and then we come back to your second one. And my first pick is Comes a Horseman. And Comes a Horseman, I picked. It's not because it's one of my favorites. I picked it because I thought it was representative for that type of film that is very much anchored in the 70s. And this is a late 70s movie, so I think this came out in 78. It's kind of the melancholy, late westernish kind of movie that represents a clash of worlds. It's a swan song to a way of life. I'm just gonna give a quick summary of the story, and then I'm gonna give a few items of what I thought was interesting about it. And the story is that you got this guy Frank, played by James Caan. He's a vet, just as his buddy Billy Joe, played by Mark Harmon. They come back from the war. I think it's World War II. They buy a piece of land from Ella Connors, and Ella Connors is played by Jane Fonda, out in, I think, the Colorado plains or whatever, somewhere, to build a ranch. So that's their dream. Because if you watch a war movie, they're all like, "Oh, after the war, what are we gonna do? We're gonna buy a piece of land."
Exactly. Yeah.
So this is kind of where. Absolutely, like American war movie.
That's their way of starting over or whatever.
Yeah. So, and then there's this big tycoon called Jacob Ewing, played by Jason Robards. And he used to have a relationship with Ella Connors when they were younger, and he's after their land. Ella and Frank are kind of easy prey because both are always like one or two harvests away from ruin, and so they need to get plenty of cattle to market to make ends meet. So it's a really tough life that they're having. And Ewing has already bought up all the land around them, and he has the federal government on his side because the federal government wants some of the land to be designated for exploration for oil or something. Right. And when his goons kill his buddy, Frank ends up teaming up with Ella to face Ewing down. Right. So that's kind of the premise of the story, and it's it struck me kind of like the open range kind of movie. So
that's what I was thinking of when I was watching it, open range. And and it has a little touch of There Will Be Blood in there too, with the oil, with Ewing, with Jason Robards' character. He has a little bit of like that Daniel Plainview thing going on, but I think overall, I think There Will Be Blood is a better movie. But I mean, I did like this one. I thought it went by pretty fast. I was watching it. I was like, wow, that flew by, that movie.
Because it was just you have the free ranch kind of people on the one side. You have the big shot industrialist on the other. You have the individualism versus capitalism kind of thing, and you have the last three cowboys that they're doing God's honest work, and you have the big shot greedy fella, and it's kind of a symbolism for a country going through profound change also.
Right. That's a good point.
What I found interesting also, that there's a lot of little ties, because it's also a coming home movie, because it's about veterans coming home. Right. And of course, Jane Fonda was already in a movie called Coming Home.
Oh yeah, Coming Home. Was that the same year? I think it was the same year.
I forgot to look it up because it might have been.
I think it was 78.
Quentin Quentin doesn't like coming home, by the way.
Yeah,
I think he mentioned that in the book because he finds it too like contrived or whatever.
Oh yeah.
And I thought Jane Fonda was great in this.
Yeah,
So
she's. I was gonna say when I was watching it, I was thinking she was playing the anti-Barbarella.
Yeah, it's a very, very strong character. So there's a few things that struck me, and I hope this kind of illustrates of why I picked this one.
Yeah.
So you have a really good director. You have Alan Pakula. He did all the President's Men.
Yep.
And
Parallax View.
Yeah, the Parallax View also, exactly. You have cinematographer Gordon Willis. He's one of the big ones. He did The Godfather. He's like Coppola's little entourage camera guy, and the movie looks the part. I mean, it looks absolutely amazing.
It definitely has the 70s kind of like darkish, you know what I mean, kind of like a dark tone to it too.
And just visually. Like Scarecrow opens,
CMI sort of
the plains, the Colorado mountains. And they have the people who are small dots in the landscape. Right. And it gives a little good little atmosphere to, the cowboys tending to the cattle, and you see the enormous physical work that goes into, keeping this enormous land
going in the cattle
to their name also, because if they cannot reap the bounty of the land, they will lose it.
Right. And then the battle between the two different people, like one person's just trying to like kind of live peacefully and like do her thing, and then like the other guy's trying to like impose his will on everyone, and also there's an important part like at the beginning, like where I don't want to spoil anything, but anyway, there is a point where James Caan's character could just walk away from this, but he decides not to. Remember that little part where it's like so that's sort of an important part. Like that would have changed the whole thing. But of course, it's a movie, so he's not gonna just take the take the easy way out. He's gonna go the other way. But
I think what this movie does well is not just that that layer of the people, but also it does a good job at saying, this is, and it's not just the people that are tough here and have to be tough. Yeah. Because the good guys versus bad guys, and the robber barons grabbing the land or whatever, but also the movie goes to great lengths also showing like the weather is tough, the soil is dry, and
it's very rough.
The circumstances are really hard.
It's harsh stuff.
Yeah, it's really hard, and it's not just about good and bad and whatever, and the little guy and the big guy. It's also like these have to be tough characters, and as you said, they could just sell the land and walk away, but for a number of reasons they don't. And this is kind of this is for me, from a European perspective, this is a very typical American story, of course, that has been told numerous times before, but it makes it interesting because it blends the character level with the land level in a way, and it smacks a little bit of Heaven's Gate or the Missouri Breaks or the Range or whatever.
Yep, definitely has those to it.
And so
I liked it. I thought this was a good film. I mean, there's maybe every time you watch these movies, there's like a little certain things that like maybe don't hit you the right way. But another thing I was thinking was that James Caan, and one of my favorite actors in the movie was Richard Farnsworth, he plays I don't think he's related to Jane Fonda's character. He's just like one of the guys that works on her ranch. I forgot his
foreman or something.
Yeah, I forgot his name, but he's like one of my favorite people in the movie. But I also remember that him and James Caan would go on to be in Misery together, which is just a little like off topic thing. But I just thought of that while I was watching. But yeah, he was one of the best characters in the movie. But Jason Robards, he didn't really get a ton to do. Like he was sort of just playing like the evil villain of the movie, like through the whole thing. He didn't really, what I mean? Like he wasn't able to like.
Yeah,
it was sort of like two-dimensional in a way. He didn't, but I mean, he was good. But I mean, I don't think they gave him enough to really,
Yeah, and this brings me a little bit to the problems with the movie, and I would say the biggest problem is the script. I mean, Dennis Linton Clark or whatever, he's like a nobody. I think the relationship with Ewing is unclear. as is his motivation, which is part of the problem, as you mentioned.
Yeah, it's a little murky, like a little murky.
I find Frank too one-dimensional a little bit.
Yeah.
And when they kill his partner, this is hardly a thing in the movie. I don't know.
It
struck me like it should have been a bigger deal.
Yeah, it was just it kind of flew by that.
There's a bunch of holes in the script. But I dug out a review from the LA Times of that year, and I think it points to exactly what you and I have said. And let me just would I have it quoted? So the movie's not about the plot as such, and you mentioned that about the 70s earlier.
Right.
The movie's not about the plot as such, but about the way of life which the plot interrupts. The care and authenticity with which that way of life is recorded helps Comes a Horseman overcome some real problems, notably a pace that is that's all too reverentially slow and a totally inadequate delineation of the Robards character.
God. Yeah,
and I think the movie would have been so much stronger if that character would have been, more fleshed out. And
exactly.
Like it's tagged onto it.
It's a little bit too like just an old school mustache twirling villain. Like he didn't really have a lot to do in it. He didn't.
It's just a bad guy because they need a bad.
Just the bad guy. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
But I mean overall, yeah.
Yeah, I think overall, I mean, I would absolutely recommend it. It's got, it's nice looking, has a great soundtrack. The performances are nice and great.
Yeah, I thought it was good, and I really like Jane Fonda in this movie too. I have to say,
absolutely.
I thought she was really
such a tough character, and the Khan and Fonda have great chemistry.
Definitely.
I think it gets some bad reviews also, and it's I don't think it's on anyone's top list, but I think it's almost like one that's overlooked for the wrong reasons. I mean,
it kind of reminded me a little bit of not that it reminded me of Parallax View, but it sort of had that same, like James Caan's character is sort of like, in a way, sort of like Joe Frady in a way. If he like in certain ways, like I think what reminded me of that is when he goes to the bar and the guy starts to start like trouble with him and he just like knocks his ass on the ground. Like it just reminded me of like Joe Frady and when he goes to the bar in Parallax View and like he has like that big fight with that guy that picks on him. I don't know. I guess that's what it was. It was sort of like a little thing moment. But anyways. Yeah, but I mean, I overall, I have to say, I had never seen this movie before, and I'm a huge Western fan, as you know. So this is one that I kind of like missed. I don't know, it was just one of those little ones that fell through the cracks for me. But I thought the movie flew by. Like when I was watching it, I was like, wow, it's over already. I was just, I just got into it, and yeah, Jane Fonda and James Caan are two of my favorites too.
And I think there's a whole bunch of movies that are kind of like this from the 70s. I remember another one that is, it's a different story, but it's a similar type movie. It's the one with Mel Gibson and Sissy Spacek, I think.
Oh yeah, I don't think I know what is it, The River or something?
By the River or something, yeah.
Something like that. I haven't seen that one, but I know about it. But
and as I said, it's not just that there's the economic or character problems, but also nature in the country that is harsh.
Yeah, there's been a lot of movies about that sort of
the
story.
Stubbornness of folks. Well, you just move somewhere else.
Right. I mean, it's just they're too proud to move or something, or like I don't know what it is, but it's just like the Jane Fonda's character. She's like, I'm gonna do whatever I got to do to like hold on to my land, and she's like, but I mean, that's what you like about the character though, because that she's like she won't like back down to this guy and stuff, and James Caan's just trying to help her out and like do the right thing and stuff. But
and also for him it would be so much easier to walk away because he's not like sentimentally attached to the place. But for her, she's got history there.
I have to say that I would have walked away. I would have been like, okay, I'll go. See you later. I'm gonna go take this money and go like live down in Florida or something. I'm not gonna live on this goddamn freaking ranch.
I mean,
that was tough. And Mark Harmon was in the movie for like 5 minutes, and he's like, he's kind of like laughing and goofing around, and all of a sudden he's like dead. All of a sudden, like 10 minutes later. Yeah, I mean that must have been one of his. That must have been one of his first movies. I don't think it was his very first movie, but
it was the shortest movie.
definitely his shortest movie. Yeah, I mean But that was a good film. That was something I hadn't seen before, and I remember I kind of like heard about it like here and there over the past year. Like I keep seeing Comes a Horseman. I think you were talking about it, and I was like, I gotta check that movie out.
And it's out on Blu-ray, so it's it's easy to find.
Yeah, so it probably has a nice new brand new transfer and everything. Yeah, that's awesome. So That was a good pick. That was that was another good quintessential 70s movie.
Yeah, also
I
a
would
little
say.
bit overlooked,
Yeah.
probably. Which
Yeah,
is
overlooked
always nice.
Yeah. And Elegy Pacula, I mean, he had a good run in the 70s. He did Clute, he did Parallax View, he did All the President's Men. Those are some of the most popular movies of that decade, I think, too. And okay, so
he
should I
also
do
did Clute, exactly, and Clute is also with
Clute.
Jane Fonda.
Right. So that was another good team up with them, I think.
Mm-hmm.
And let's see. So should we do the next pick on my?
Yeah, let's move on to your second pick.
Okay, my next pick is The Friends of Eddie Coyle, which was released in 1973 by Paramount Pictures, and it stars Robert Mitchum. And I'll read a little synopsis of the story. In one of the best performances of his legendary career, Robert Mitchum plays small-time gunrunner Eddie Fingers Coyle in Peter Yates's adaptation of George V. Higgins' acclaimed novel, The Friends of Eddie Coyle. World-weary and living hand-to-mouth, Coyle works on the sidelines of the seedy Boston underworld just to make ends meet. But when he finds himself facing a second stretch of hard time, he's forced to weigh loyalty to his criminal colleagues against snitching to stay free. Directed with a sharp eye for its gritty locales and an open heart for its less than heroic characters, this is one of the true treasures of 1970s Hollywood filmmaking, a suspenseful crime drama in stark, unforgiving daylight. Yeah, and this over the past few years, I've rewatched this movie over and over again. This is another one with characters that are kind of outsiders, of course. And Robert Mitchum that's one of my most favorite Robert Mitchum roles is Eddie Coyle. And another character that I really love in the movie is Stephen Keats, who plays the guy that sells the guns to Eddie. And if you've seen the movie Death Wish, he plays Charles Bronson's son, and he's kind of like a nerdy jerk in that movie. But in this movie, he's such a charismatic character in this movie. He's just one of my favorite. That's one of my favorite roles of any crime movie of the 70s is Jackie Brown, by the way. The name sounds familiar, but I wonder where that went on to show up again. But but the authenticity of this movie is really what I like about it. And also, since I grew up in Massachusetts, seeing the different locales and stuff of that time period was another little reason I like the movie. But just really the acting and the authenticity of the characters, it seems very, very real to me. Before you watch The Departed, or if you've seen The Departed or The Town, those two movies that are about Boston-based crime characters, this one is kind of the one that started it all, because it's just sort of the precursor to those movies. But yeah, I mean, it's an awesome film. And I just wanted to read a little the critics' reviews. Vincent Canby of the New York Times called it a good, tough, unsentimental movie. And Roger Ebert said Eddie Coyle is made for Mitchum, a weary middle-aged man, but tough and proud, a man who has been hurt too often in life not to respect pain, a man who will take chances to protect his own territory. But also the supporting cast is really excellent in this movie. Peter Boyle plays one of Eddie's one of his fellow mob guys. He's working
got a great role in this.
Yeah, he's an excellent role. And also Richard Jordan plays the cop that Eddie kind of goes to. Actually, both him and Peter Boyle's characters are being kind of manipulated by this cop played by Richard Jordan. So he's sort of using them to get information on on crime and stuff. And they're trying to and Eddie is coming up for a certain sentencing. So he's trying to give away people so he can stay out of jail and stuff. And it's just really, I just love the whole, this kind of two timing stuff going on. And it's
so
awesome.
obvious to the audience though. That it's
just
a little bit, you feel a little bit sad for him
for Eddie,
because he doesn't really see it, or he doesn't want to see it.
He's smart when it comes to the game, to the crime game, but he's kind of naive when it comes to dealing with the cop and stuff. So he's he's trying to do whatever he can do to get himself to stay out of jail. But the cop is kind of playing everybody against each other. He'll say something to Eddie and I can carry the ball for as far as I can go, but you're gonna have to give me more information. And then Eddie tries to give more information. And then he's also talking to Dylan, who's giving him stuff on the other guy, on the other criminals who Eddie is getting guns for. So it's just this whole back and forth two timing stuff going on. But that's just part of the story.
But then what's your take on the title? Because none of these are his friends.
They're the friends like in quotes. That's what it is. The friends of Eddie Coyle is in like they're
Right.
just they're like they're not his friends really. Of course they're not his friends, but these are the people that you deal with in the underworld. You know what I mean? But I think
Exactly.
I actually think out of all the characters in the movie, I think Jackie Brown is the most. See, they all have a code. Like Jackie Brown has his code. Like there's a great scene where he's selling guns to this kid, and the kid takes him to this like dark alley, like not an alley, but like out in the woods somewhere, and he's like, okay, something's off here. So he makes the kid like get out of the car. He like gets his like little spotlight and shines the light. He gets his gun out and he says, okay, now you're gonna have to like walk up the hill and like or like slowly walk down with the guns and stuff. So he does this stuff. He has this whole like process to like he doesn't trust anybody and he knows the rules but he's actually a very straightforward guy with the people he's dealing with. Like with he kind of like he gets along with Robert Mitchum's character, but like he doesn't know that he's like kind of like double crossing him on behind his back. So it's just a really good character. That's one of my favorite characters in the film. So
also this is just like Scarecrow. I hadn't seen the movie before, and I think the writing is absolutely brilliant.
I think it's so realistic. Like when Robert Mitchum is talking, like as Eddie, and he's like having those conversations with Jackie Brown. It seems so real. Like he's like. It just sounds so authentic to me. And I think that the writer of the book was like from that area. So he kind of like knew how like gangsters talked and stuff. And he made it pretty damn authentic. I mean, it's like, as far as like, if you watch like Jackie Brown, like the movie, like, and that seems like authentic with like Ordell. If you watch this movie, you'll notice the authenticity of like, Robert Mitchum, as Eddie and stuff. And all those guys like talking to each other, how they talk to each other. Like
Yeah. And I made a note of two things because the writing I think is brilliant, but what's even what killed it for me, I think, is the little speeches, and it's almost like a Tarantino movie or like Big Lebowski. It's super quotable. I thought it's I wrote down two things that are almost I think not in the same scene, but really somewhere in the middle. And I think Mitchum gets the best little speeches.
Yeah, he does.
There's one where he's telling the guy that he'll have a problem because he told some people they can rely on him because he told this guy he can rely on him, and they're really good at finding people.
And we know how to find people or whatever.
Yeah, we know how to. Yeah, we're really good at finding. people.
I love those little speeches he gives. Like he's like and the speech about his knuckles, how he got his knuckles, smashed.
And the ruler, as we mentioned earlier.
The ruler against the I love all those little things.
What really had me on the floor laughing almost is a little later. I think it's the scene with what you mentioned in the dark alley, the arms dealer. He says, "Life's hard, man, but it's harder
if you're stupid." I love that quote. I still use that quote even in real life. I always say that to myself.
Life's hard, man, but it's harder if you're stupid.
Yeah, and I love that little. What I always found interesting about that scene was the guy that he's driving with, that guy that he's selling the guns to. The way they talk to each other when the scene first starts, it's like they know each other. So it's like kind of something's weird. Like it's almost like they're like friends from like the old days. But then like the kid brings them to that dark alley, and all of a sudden he turns on him. Like, I just found that weird. Like, what was that about? You know what I mean? Like, why would he not trust the kid all of a sudden? But I guess that's what I mean. Like by his code, it doesn't matter who he knows and who he like gets along with. If he senses something's off, then he just totally goes like into serious mode, like total like professional mode. You know what I mean? The way you have to just see the scene, what I'm talking about. But I just thought that was interesting. That little how they seem like they're friends at first, and then all of a sudden the kid is he's like, "What the hell is going? Where are you taking me?" or something like that. I just thought that was interesting. But there's the whole movie is like that. It's just a lot of good little scenes, like between the different characters, and and I love Richard Jordan's character, and this is as the cop he's the way he's playing everybody against each other. He's like talking to Peter Boyle's character and Robert Mitchum's character, and he's just trying to you can tell he doesn't.
I think it's fascinating what a great late career Mitchum had. Really,
he did.
Not all of the movies he was.
No, not all of them, but this one is definitely one of his best in the later years of his career.
Absolutely. I recently watched The Ambassador, and that's even later. But he was even great in that. I mean,
I don't think I ever saw that one, but
It's
Was
like
that in the 80s or something? I don't know.
yeah, it's like it must have been the most ambitious canon picture. It even got Rock
Oh,
Hudson in it and whatever.
The Ambassador. I never even heard of that one.
Yeah,
That's
you gotta
weird.
watch it. It's a J. Lee
Okay.
Thompson movie.
I even noticed when I was watching the Friends of Eddie Coyle, I noticed there's a little, I think it was a nod to Thunder Road, but there's a part where they go to that little park where they're having the meeting, him and Richard Jordan, and he says something about the guys transporting moonshine. I was like, oh, that must be a little nod to Thunder Road or something, you know?
Good
He says,
catch.
I thought he says, you don't do that, do you? Or he says something to Robert Mitchum about it. He says, I don't know about that stuff. That was kind of funny, but
Yeah,
I
Thunder
just
Road is
thought
good.
of that. But I mean, but I guess when Robert Mitchum was making the movie, he actually met with some of the the Irish mob in Boston. So like he kind of like met those guys, which Alex Rocco, who plays one of the main criminal in the movie, who people will know as Mo Green in The Godfather, by the way. He plays like the main, the Jimmy Scalise, I think is his name in this movie, but he plays like the main the criminal who's getting the guns from Eddie. But he was actually part of the mob before he became an actor, so he knew all the guys in Boston, and like he had a different name and stuff. He changed his name to Alex Rocco. It was something else, but so he kind of like put Robert Mitchum in touch with all the real guys. So that probably helped kind of inform his character too, which was good. But I think the writing itself was just amazing. That's probably just the writing alone. You wouldn't even have to meet anybody in the mob. You could just read the script and get into character, and you'd be able to do it. It was just so good, awesome
Yeah, and
script.
as for the 70s nature, as you mentioned,
Another
ending-
ending with the 70s ending.
is a super bummer. I mean, I thought
Yeah,
it was
that's another one.
harsh.
But it was actually kind of cool though. I mean, I like it's one of those endings where like you feel bad, but then it's like the way it ends is kind of awesome. I mean, in a way, the way it's just like it's so like badass and so like like who gives a F about anything like type of ending. I just love the ending of the movie. You have to watch it and see what I'm talking about. Yeah. That's the type of stuff I look for. Like when I watch 70s movies, it's like those things that like, wow, can't believe they did that type thing.
Can't believe they did that.
Yeah. I can't believe it's not butter. So that's my second pick.
Yeah, that's a great two feature.
Oh, thanks. I'm glad you liked it.
Yeah,
that's what I wanted.
As I said, I felt like catching up with Peter.
Yeah, I know. It's just and also, but like where you are, like you don't have the same. You probably don't have as much like access to the stuff. I mean, I probably have more access to a lot of stuff than you have these days. You know what I mean?
Oh, yeah, maybe this is
where we are.
Interesting for the listeners. Scarecrow is on the Internet Archive, and it's not Blu-ray quality, but it is in HD, and the other one can be found as well. So I mean,
and Eddie Coyle I think is on Criterion, so it's you can get it. If you can get Criterion discs and order it, and
both great movies.
Yeah, worthwhile. So your next pick is.
Right on. My next pick is definitely one of my favorite 70s movies, and I'll mention why I picked it before I'll tell a little bit more about the story. And it's High Plains Drifter.
Yeah, that's one of my most. I have to say, it's one of my favorites too. By the way. Yeah, it's an awesome film.
And of course, in Cinema Speculation, there's quite a bit of Eastwood in there, and not just about Dirty Harry, but also the person and the filmmaker.
Escape from Alcatraz too, which we didn't say.
Escape from Alcatraz, exactly. Yeah. And I picked High Plains Drifter because I think it's a good example of how someone like Eastwood maneuvered the 70s New Hollywood tectonic change that was going on, kind of, because he's not one of the other ones. He's not it's not a progressive type
he's not one of the movie brats either, really. He's sort of like before
it doesn't fall into any of these camps. He's more of the classic, like he came out of the Seagull School. He did a stint
Sergio Leone too.
And with this movie, he takes a classic genre and incorporates kind of a little bit of supernatural elements and modern day metaphors to get, to do away kind of with the classic themes and mature them in a way. And I think that's kind of that's always been his way of dealing with how times have changed. Is he matures the things that he's doing with. It's like he's chipping away at a block of and I'm having a hard time describing it, but he's not Eastwood's not doing new stuff because there's new times. He's doing old stuff in a new way because there's new times.
Right. I see what you're saying. Yeah. Right.
So, and he takes that to an even further extent later in Unforgiven, for example.
Right.
And I think both movies I think are bookends. High Plains Drifter and Unforgiven.
Would you call it like a deconstruction of the Western or something? Maybe, I don't know. Like he's kind of like
maybe
that type of thing. Yeah.
He would probably never say that he deconstructs them.
Yeah.
And I'm not sure if that's what he's doing, but
or deglorification of the West or something, maybe.
At least on the level of certain themes, I would say, yeah.
Because I feel like what he's been doing since the beginning is like he started out like playing the traditional Western hero. Then as he gets older, he kind of learns more about the Western hero, what the reality of, or maybe he's showing the reality of the Western people, you know what I mean, as opposed to like the good guy in the white hat. And then like as you go to like Outlaw Josie Wales, you see like a different side of it. But then when you finally get to Unforgiven, it's just a total like, this is like the total like not worth being, believing in these Western heroes because they were just kind of scumbag, bastard people, you know what I mean, that type of thing.
And he strips away a little bit the shiny stuff, and his movies are a little bit more no nonsense in a way.
Yeah,
and this one, I mean, I hope that everyone knows about the movie, but I
think it's pretty well known. Yeah, I think this one is pretty well known.
For completeness sake, this is a Western, and there's a mysterious stranger that rides into the town of Lago, and he already finds an atmosphere of fear there. So it's like the citizens are harassed by
They're hiding something.
Or they're hiding something. You don't quite know what's going on. He shoots a couple, so it's probably he becomes the talk of the town. He's quick with a gun. There's the Sheriff Sam, played by Walter Barnes, who we know from The Big Gun Down.
I was going to say The Big Gun Down.
And then he's got his little scheming sidekick Mordecai.
Who's Billy who's played by Billy Curtis, who's in one of my favorite. I just wanted to mention Little Cigars. People, if you're like a Grindhouse movie fan, you'll know that movie, Little Cigars. He was also in The Wizard of Oz, by the way, too.
So the sheriff and Mordecai, they're skeptical about the newcomer, because he's kind of a rough guy. He's got a rapey tendency for sure.
He's very rapey in this movie, very rapey.
But interestingly about the story, so the town's business folk, they have other worries. There's a local bad guy called Bridges, played by Geoffrey Lewis, and his gang, and they're about to be released from jail, and the business people fear that they will come to Lago to take revenge or whatever.
Right.
And so what they do is they hire the stranger as their protector, but they will have to comply with certain demands that he has. And
he basically F's the whole. He basically. I mean, that's the best thing about the movie is that he is. You still there?
Yeah, I'm still there.
Okay, I thought your microphone was cutting off, but that's really the best thing about the movie is like how he plays the town like against each other. Like he just comes into town. He just like everybody's all pissed off and like upset, and it's just awesome.
And so they make this deal, and then at some point they realize that they have practically made a deal with the devil.
Right. Yeah.
So that's the story, and then of course, so this is more like an early '70s movie. This came out in '73. It was shot by Mono Lake in Northern California. I've been there actually. At some
You've been there, really? Oh.
Weird, eerie little place.
That is an awesome, weird, like kind of like alien landscape of like that where that is,
And it's
such a weird thing.
Kind of like quite a remarkable like post spaghetti western.
Yeah, and I was gonna say it reminded me a little of the beginning reminds me of Fistful of Dollars a little bit, just like how he like kind of drifts in and he's sort of like the stranger and everybody's kind of looking at him like strange. It sort of like has a little bit of that touch to it, right?
Yeah, he would also do something later in what's it called?
Pale Rider or something?
Pale Rider, exactly.
Yeah.
But out
sort
of
the same idea. Yeah.
Out of his little post spaghetti western ones, like Hang 'Em High and Tumult, I think this is the best one.
Yeah, I think I agree with. I mean, I really like those, but I think this is my favorite out of those three. I think it's just such a tightly well-made film. It's like a what do you call it? Like a clockwork, like like a Swiss clock. It just perfectly little story, little
Yeah,
revenge
he
story.
went through the Seagull school. So
Yeah, definitely. It's
you know,
definitely it's almost like a Don Siegel film that he didn't make, like a Don Siegel film that he
exactly.
didn't
That's
direct.
how it's usually
Yeah.
called. Yeah.
Yeah,
And
right.
and absolutely. So there's a few things that I like, and one of them obviously is the movie's style.
Yeah.
So it's only his second work as a director, and for that, I think he had a lot of help on the movie.
Yeah.
The script is by Ernest Tidyman, who did wrote the French Connection.
Yeah.
And it's kind of he picked like a cynical allegory type movie for this one. So it's not a straightforward like Hang 'em High. So as you mentioned earlier, it is a classic genre, but he takes the elements, and the elements here are not as classical.
I think what I was thinking when I was watching this movie, like, was I don't know why, but it just brought to mind like political parties. Like I was thinking like I was thinking like the town are like Republicans, and Stacey Bridges and his guys are like the GOP, and then they're trying to get revenge. And then I don't know, whatever, Clint is like a Democrat, I guess. But I don't know. I just was thinking like in those terms. Not that it has anything to do with that, but I just was like, just the way the characters are. I was just like, this is kind of like reminds me of like Republicans versus Democrat.
I'll get back to that.
Yeah.
What it could mean in a second.
Yeah.
Because I have another interpretation also.
Yeah.
What it could mean.
Yeah.
I like it also because it's just in terms of the atmosphere, it's absolutely great.
Yeah.
Like the increasingly apocalyptic atmosphere.
Mm-hmm.
Like it gets weirder and weirder.
Yeah, it does. Yeah.
And it's still, you have all the cool lines in there. You have some nice dramatic reveals along the way. You have your shootouts, your fisticuffs, and what have you. I mean, it's still a Western, but also, as you mentioned, it's kind of he runs a tight ship. So the movie wastes little time in the beginning. It pulls out all the stops towards the end.
Yeah, definitely.
From when I first watched it as a teenager, I remembered it as a sinister, brutal Western, spaghetti Western clone, kind of.
Yeah.
When I watch it today, it seems, I want to say, less violent to me, but it's still sinister and has a lot more. I would say has a lot more to offer than meets the eye. I mean, it gets scolded because it's like so violent and rapey and whatever, but it's there's a lot of stuff that you could analyze and interpret in this.
And it is another one with an awesome ending, like sort of like a 70s ending, like with the mysterious type ending.
Right, but with a twist. I mean, he does ride into the sunset, kind of.
Yeah,
he does. You're like sick to your stomach.
Kind of a weird. I love the sound, like the score of the, like when it starts, like that. Like it has like that weird, high pitched like noise. I don't know what it is, but it's just it's like very like, it's kind of like a ghost like kind of like pitch. I don't know. I just love that the way it starts. Like he rides out of the heat, like the heat of the desert.
Biblical kind of thing, like
supernatural
type. The devil or whatever.
Yeah. Who is this guy? Like you don't know what he is. Is he a devil? Is he an angel? What is he?
And he's not an angel, because an angel, he wouldn't rape Werner Bloom.
Or an angel of death. Yeah, I know, that's true. I guess he would rape somebody. Like he's like, and also the girl that he goes after is Mariana Hill, who people will know from The Godfather Part 2. She was in a bunch of like good stuff back then. Good stuff. And she was in The Baby. Did you ever see The Baby? Remember that weird one with the adult baby? That's what we always talk about, that one on the other podcast.
Sure.
She was in that one too, but anyways, I'm going off topic.
Yeah. But as I mentioned, I mean, the ending is absolutely
There's a great
crazy. And also the movie has a progression, and at some point the town is painted red, and
that's an awesome.
This by itself is kind of a metaphor, of course.
Yeah, just a little bit.
And then the citizens, of the town, they realize that they've really effed this up, as you said,
right?
And it turns into there's a kind of Armageddon in the end, actually.
Right, but I mean, the whole thing of the story is they're hiding something, and that's why they're like, they're kind of like guilty of something, like
they don't
really know what it is. Yeah,
that's
they do.
What makes it kind
and
of.
Clint Eastwood comes in and just kind of he manipulates the whole town against he kind of manipulates everybody, and
they're not innocent victims of whatever's going on, and this is what makes it interesting in the end. And I think that's also what makes it morally okay to see what's going on, because this is not, they're not the victims here.
No, they're all guilty, like all the whole place is guilty. But I love like the part like I love like, since they know that Clint Eastwood's character is a total awesome gunfighter, like, they hire him to, like, protect them from the, and like they say you can do whatever you want, and he goes into the general store, and like some old Indian, like, who they're always like telling to get the hell out of there. He just gives like he gives the little kids like a big jars of candy, and he gives the Indian like a big huge stack of like these beautiful blankets and stuff, and like they can't do anything about it because they have to, like, keep him on to protect them. So it's like, I just love that whole how he manipulates everybody on that level. It was just really great. Clint like came up with his little stock company of actors, because those are all the actors you kind of see pop up in his movies like over the years. Like Jeffrey Lewis was in like Thunderbolt and Lightfoot. Not that it was his movie, but like, he kind of like helped kind of produce that movie. I think. I think that was a Mel Paso movie. Yeah.
The soundtrack is from the same guy too, Lee Barton. He made a soundtrack for
right.
Thunderbolt and Lightfoot.
And then, yep, that's right. And then, they did be like an Unforgiven. Remember, like Anthony James, who played one of the Stacey Bridges' pal there, like one of the three there. He showed up in Unforgiven later on. But like, they'd kind of, and also like Every Which Way But Loose, and like all those movies, like those were sort of his little acting troupe there. Anyways, I was just gonna mention that just to movie geek talk.
I pulled out a critic quote as well for this one.
Okay.
And then I have like kind of my own main takeaway and to finish this. So I found one from Kevin Thomas, LA Times. He wrote that the movie is a stylized, allegorical Western of much chillingly paranoid atmosphere. We talked about that. And considerable sardonic humor that confirms Eastwood's territorial flair. It's also a pretty violent business that won't disappoint the millions who flock to the Leone Westerns. So I think that's kind of spot on, even though he doesn't get too analytical about it. And I think we got more analytical about it than he did here.
Yeah, I mean, it's just sort of like it's almost like you can see that Clint wanted to do his own Western. And he kind of used like Sergio Leone and Don Siegel as like his like inspiration to try to like kind of like forge his own. Because I think this was like his second movie, right? After Play Misty for Me. Yeah. So that was like his. So he was this is like really started developing his own style, really, I think, with this movie.
But he could have picked something simpler too. That's what I was saying earlier. I think it was absolutely more to it than meets the eye in the end.
Yeah, I think so. I think he was, I think Clint especially was really great at finding scripts. Like he had a really good eye for scripts for some, for what, that's just was one of his real strengths, I think, over the years.
Yeah, and it's not like they took a Western and had some guy write kind of like an intellectually inspired script for it or something because they needed another Hang 'Em High or whatever. No, this is it may be a Western, but it's so much more than a Western.
Right. And I almost feel like, like after like watching all these movies and reading the books and stuff and just being a fan, now I'm almost thinking could it have also been like a little twist on like Vietnam, like what was going on with Vietnam, because it's like almost like, look at like the townspeople and like that type of thing. They're like kind of like corrupt and they're just, they're letting this stuff go on and, they're kind of turning the other way and, watching these people the main character is, not the main character, but the main, the guy in the story played by Buddy Van Horn, who was the sheriff of this town. We never really explained what happened on that part. He gets whipped by Stacy and his boys. They basically whip him to death, and the townspeople just stand and watch them do it. And they don't try to help him. So I'm thinking like maybe that's like a little take on Vietnam or something. But who knows? I mean, it might not have anything to do with it. But they're always talking about those of that time period, like how a lot of the movies like kind of were like allegories about Vietnam or something. But usually the directors say, "Oh yeah, we weren't even thinking about that when we were making it." But I don't know. I was just thinking of maybe that's another little aspect. Yeah, I mean, it's that wasn't our intention or whatever they were trying to do.
Yeah, I mean the movie is so metaphorical on a lot of levels, and there's so much symbolism in it. I mean, it's almost like it's not even symbolism anymore.
Yeah,
I mean,
it's
they
not, yeah.
renamed the town to Hell. I
Yeah,
mean, it's like
right.
too on the nose almost.
Yeah, I just feel like watching it now, like I just can't help thinking about like political parties, like or just like politics in general, just like the way like corrupt people and stuff, like how they just like let things happen and don't do anything about it, and it takes like some like outsider to come in and like really change things. But that's just my personal
or
view
it's
on right
also
now.
about or also about what's the price you pay for certain things,
Right,
or
right, yeah,
what kind of price are you willing to pay, because they could
right,
have
right,
solved their problems in other
yeah,
ways,
yeah,
rather than sell their soul to the devil,
right,
kind of,
yeah.
in a way.
But I mean,
Okay,
it's just
so there's one thought that I had, and this is after thinking about the movie, but also thinking about a little bit about what Quentin wrote about Dirty Harry's
yeah,
Callahan.
yeah,
I thought that in this movie, there's a difference from what happens here, or what happens here is different from the kind of compromise that Callahan embodies
yeah,
when it comes to law and order.
right,
Because here the stranger is kind of this Faustian deal that they did with the devil,
yeah,
and the town folks, they enter in this deal willingly, and they have something to hide too, as you said.
yeah, right,
But then Callahan is more like a Judge Dredd kind of cop, but
hmm,
here the stranger is just an evil man. And I think
right,
that's kind of interesting, the two different sorts of characters where he plays, because Callahan gets a sort of criticism from the critics and whatever, and he
yeah,
represents kind of a societal compromise.
yeah,
And here the stranger too is something that is a product of that kind of town society, but
right.
it's kind of a crummy deal that in the end, because
Yeah, it's just
they have a sheriff, but it's a shitty sheriff.
right. I mean, this is like, but I mean, this is like the good guy of the town was the sheriff, the original sheriff, and he got like killed basically, and then Clint comes along and he's just using their sins against them, basically all the stuff that they've like done wrong. He's kind of like calling them out and like making them
Like
deal with
holding
it.
up the
You know what I mean?
mirror,
They don't, but they don't even know like that it's happening. They're just kind of like they're just so used to being like chickens about everything that they just like go. They're just trying to get out of it however they can, like usual. But he kind of like takes them to task throughout the movie, and like all in all different ways. You just have to watch the movie. I don't want to ruin it all, but but yeah, I mean that's what makes the movie so enjoyable. Watching him, like even the town preacher. He's like the part where one of my favorite parts is when he's like, oh, you can't turn all these people out into the street. They're all our brothers and sisters. And he goes, these people they're your brothers and sisters? And he goes, well, yes. And he goes, well, you won't mind if they move in with you, will you? And he's like, and then he goes, no, I won't. And then he goes, everybody, you can move into our houses. And he goes, for the usual hotel rates. I just thought that was hilarious. The way, it's just there's always like a little twist. Like you kind of get Clint kind of gets them. He's like, yeah, they're our brothers and sisters, all right. And like until they're gonna move in with you, then he doesn't want anything to do with them.
Yeah,
I just love those little
really
moments.
point.
Like yeah, I just love those little moments. That's
The
like the
movie
type of
is
stuff he does.
the movie is smarter than it's
Yeah,
given credit for, and
yeah, it's
especially I
good.
would say it's smarter than critics back then gave it
Yeah.
credit for.
And I feel like that was kind of Clint's like outlook on things. Like he liked to make those little points in his movies. Like he'd kind of like he liked to tackle hypocrisy and stuff. You know what I mean? That type of thing. So yeah, that was an excellent pick. I mean, that's one of my favorite movies. So favorite westerns too, in general.
Yeah, so we had 4 movies. You picked 2, I picked 2.
Yeah, and that's like we could do like 1,000.
I think all 4 of them could have been in Cinema Speculation too.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, those are definitely all good picks. I think. I mean, definitely good. Like I mean, I think, like I was saying, I think if you're a movie geek, like you probably know about these movies already, anyways. But those are just it's difficult to pick like 2 like movies or 4 movies out of like 1,000. More than 1,000 movies of the 70s. I don't know how many movies were made in that decade, but we could have gone anyway on this. We could have done grindhouse movies or late 70s movies or whatever it was. But we just happened to pick like a few of our favorites, and just to give a little glimpse into what we like. That's all, basically.
Yeah, and one you
know,
hadn't seen, and two
yeah.
that I hadn't seen. So this is a
Yeah.
pretty good track record, because
I mean,
everybody has a gap here and there, and
Yeah,
it's always
right.
nice to close one and discover
Right.
something new.
I'm sure if someone hasn't seen, like, Comes a Horseman, or, Eddie Coyle, or Scarecrow, or High Plains Drifter, hopefully they, after they listen to this,
good
or,
Blu-rays. There's good Blu-rays out there of this one too.
Yeah, definitely.
Mm-hmm. And we have December to look forward to.
Are you a person that would rather discuss like I have to give a shout out to the Video Archives podcast, because like I've been listening to that podcast and I'm really enjoying it a lot, but what they do on their show is they'll pick like 3 movies that like maybe they're not like the biggest fans of, or maybe they haven't even seen like all the movies yet, but that gives like a good discussion too, because it's new to them, Yeah,
have like a
or they have a
theme,
theme,
at least the first 2, and then they attack on the third one or something.
Right. But I mean, it's not stuff like, but they're not picking like, Jaws, Star Wars, and, whatever, and The Godfather. They're picking like these little tiny movies that like maybe people like. A lot of the stuff I haven't even seen before, but most of them I have. But I mean, then there's other ones like that I haven't seen, but
there's some obscure stuff in there.
There's obscure stuff. And then so, I mean, you can do I think that's the thing with podcasts. You can either go that route, or you can just pick your favorites. Because the thing is, we don't do a ton of episodes. So it's like, are we going to like spend an episode doing like movies we don't like? It doesn't really make much sense to me. I feel like we should, unless we were doing like constantly doing podcasts, then that would be different. Then we could do a whole range of stuff. But I feel like pick the movies that we like first, and then, what I mean?
We pick something that we find interesting.
Yeah.
Like we could also pick a genre. Like we could do like war movies that we recently
war
discovered,
movies,
or something.
Like 2 or 3 war movies, or 4 war movies, or whatever it is, But anyways, I'm just thinking of that stuff as far as podcasts go. But so I guess we'll wrap up the show.
I'll wrap it up.
Okay.
Obviously, we're always glad that you out there listened. We always look forward to comments, emails, suggestions, criticism, and whatever. And
you can find us on YouTube and also on Instagram now too, where we post a lot of pictures and videos.
Instagram, Facebook, Twitter.
Furious Cinema. And
the podcast will, of course, also go out on Spotify and the usual channels.
Yep. So okay. Yeah. Okay,
thanks
so this
listening.
is Pete Roberts, and thanks, Seb, for stopping in and talking again. That was really fun.
Yeah,
we had some good
to be
chatter
back.
there.
Back in saddle.
Okay, we'll see you next time on the Furious Cinema Podcast. Take care, everyone.
And that's that.